Welcome back to 88 Chapter Chat. Ready for another deep dive? This one's all about a topic that's super important to ABA, but often gets overlooked. We're going to be talking about delivering reinforcers effectively. It's not enough to just know what someone likes or finds rewarding.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just picking the right item or activity.
Right. It's all about how you use those reinforcers. That's what truly makes the difference when we're trying to shape behavior.
Totally. Imagine you've got a toolbox, right?
Mm,
Full of all these amazing, shiny tools, but no clue how to use any of them.
exactly. And that's what this deep dive is all about. Think of it like your cheat sheet for maximizing the impact of those reinforcers.
You got it. We'll be breaking it down, sharing real-world examples, and giving you some practical tips you can actually use.
Perfect. So to really drive this home, we've got a story that's the perfect illustration of what not to do. It's about this employee, and her boss tried to reinforce her, get this, with a 5-week-old memo.
Oh, wow.
And the kicker, he did it right after ripping into her about her work.
Talk about a major reinforcement fail. Who even does that?
Seriously. You think he even understood the point of reinforcement in the first place?
Right. It's did he think that stale memo was going to magically erase that whole blow-up?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? This really highlights how important timing and context are when it comes to reinforcement. I mean, that boss totally missed the mark on both.
Completely. And for us in the ABA world, understanding those nuances of reinforcement, well, it's crucial.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the people we work with. Everyone's so different, right? They've got their own unique things that motivate them, things they prefer.
For sure. A one-size-fits-all approach to reinforcement just won't cut it.
You can't just pull out the same reinforcer every time and expect it to work like magic.
No way. That's where we're going to dive into 7 key guidelines for delivering reinforcement effectively.
These are guidelines that have been, researched and proven to work. They can help you navigate all the little complexities of reinforcement so you can maximize the impact and avoid those super awkward situations like the one with the memo,
Definitely. No one wants to be the memo boss.
Okay, let's break these guidelines down, starting with the first one, personalization.
Yeah, personalization is huge because it really puts the focus on the individual. It's all about finding those reinforcers that truly resonate with the person based on their unique preferences and steering clear of that generic praise that feels, impersonal and just blah.
Instead of just a good job,
Yeah.
you'd say something more specific.
Right. You could say, I really appreciate how you took the initiative to organize those files. It saved me a ton of time. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of praise feels so much more real and genuine,
Totally. It shows you're actually paying attention to their effort and you're recognizing what makes their contribution special.
I love that. Okay, next up is guideline number 2, immediacy. So we want to deliver the reinforcer as soon as possible after the behavior we're trying to encourage.
It's all about that timing.
Makes sense.
Immediacy is key because it makes that connection between the behavior and the reinforcement so much stronger.
I get it. It's like when you're training a dog.
Yeah.
You wouldn't wait 5 minutes to give the treat after they finally sit, right? The treat has to come right after the sit for the dog to get it.
Exactly. And of course, humans are a bit more complex than dogs, but
Oh, yeah, definitely.
but that same principle about immediacy still applies, right?
So the sooner you give the reinforcement after the behavior, the stronger that link becomes in their mind.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Now, I know we can't always reinforce immediately, but we should definitely try our best to make it happen whenever possible.
Definitely. And if there's a delay, it's important to try and help the person remember and kind of relive that accomplishment.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're bringing them back to that moment of success, so the reinforcement still packs a punch.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got personalization and immediacy. What's next on our list of guidelines?
Number 3 is all about being specific with your reinforcement.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So this goes hand in hand with personalization.
Makes sense.
It means being super clear about exactly what behavior you're praising, not just throwing out some general compliments.
Okay, so instead of saying, great teamwork, everyone,
Yeah.
you might say something like,
You could say, I really appreciate how you all listened to each other's ideas and collaborated to find a solution that works for the whole team.
yes. That's so much better, so much more specific.
Exactly. And when you're working one-on-one with someone, you can even ask questions like, how did you manage to do that?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. It helps them think back on their actions and really understand what they did to achieve the outcome.
It's like you're reinforcing the skills they used, not just the outcome itself.
That's it.
Okay, that was guideline number 3, specificity. On to number 4. This one's all about sincerity.
Oh yeah, sincerity is super important. And you'd be surprised how often praise just comes across as, like, fake or manipulative, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
It's like, think of it this way. Genuine praise, it feels like a warm hug.
Oh, I got
But insincere praise, that feels like a cold handshake.
Ouch. Yeah, not a good feeling.
Right. And insincere praise can actually do more harm than good. It erodes trust, and it makes people question your motives.
So how do we make sure our praise is sincere then? Any tips?
Well, first off, ditch those cliches.
Okay.
You know, those empty phrases that people just throw around without really meaning them.
Right.
Instead, focus on expressing real appreciation for the specific things they did well or for the qualities you're trying to reinforce. Let your words come from the heart.
It sounds like it's all about quality over quantity, right? Like
Yeah.
a few well-chosen, heartfelt words are way better than a whole bunch of empty phrases.
Absolutely. It's not about showering them with praise for every little thing they do. It's about being genuine and thoughtful.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to guideline number 5, frequency. Now, I'm assuming this doesn't mean we're praising them for every single breath they take, right?
No, definitely not. Okay, good. It's not about constant praise, but more about being consistent with our reinforcement. We want to reinforce often enough to help those new habits stick, and really encourage those behaviors we want to see more of.
There's this idea out there that too much reinforcement can actually backfire. Like it makes people complacent or something.
Yeah, I've heard that one too.
But from what I've read, the research actually suggests the opposite. Like consistent reinforcement is what really helps create that momentum and increases the chances of seeing lasting behavior change.
Totally. Think of it like watering a plant. You got to water it regularly for it to grow and thrive.
That's a great way to put it.
If you only water it every once in a while, well, it's just going to end up stunted. It's not going to reach its full potential.
Right. Okay, I'm seeing the connection here.
Good.
So how often should we be reinforcing then? Is there like a magic number?
Well, there's a helpful guideline called the 4.1 ratio. Have you heard of that one?
Yes, I think our source material mentions that. Could you explain what that means?
Sure. Basically, it means aiming for 4 positive interactions for every negative one.
Interesting.
It's a pretty good benchmark, and there's research to back it up. This ratio has been shown to lead to more positive outcomes, like across different environments, from classrooms to workplaces.
So it's not about ignoring those mistakes or challenges, but making sure the positive stuff outweighs the negative, right?
Exactly. It's about creating a positive and supportive environment where people feel encouraged, and when they feel motivated to learn and grow.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's all about catching people doing things right and acknowledging their efforts, no matter how small.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, we've covered 5 guidelines so far. What's next on the list?
Guideline number 6 warns against mixing reinforcement and punishment at the same time.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
Right. It might be tempting to try to, balance things out, give some praise and then immediately follow it with criticism,
Right.
But as our source material points out, that approach just creates confusion. It's like a sandwich method gone wrong. You're giving them these mixed messages, and it ends up a soggy mess.
Perfect analogy. I get it. It's like you're saying, good job, but.
Exactly. That but just wipes out all the good vibes from the praise and leaves them feeling unsure of where they stand.
It also makes people start to associate praise with something negative.
Yeah, exactly. They start to dread the praise because they know the criticism is coming right behind it.
So I guess the takeaway here is to keep those two things separate.
Right. Separate the reinforcement from the corrective feedback. That's how you get the best results and keep things clear.
Makes sense. When you're reinforcing, just focus on the positive. And when you need to give corrective feedback, do it in a separate conversation,
Totally.
Yeah.
And make sure it's constructive and supportive.
I like it. Clear boundaries.
Yeah.
Now, what's our final guideline for this section?
Our last one is about not mixing goal setting and reinforcement.
Okay, let's unpack that one.
So this guideline is all about remembering to celebrate those little victories, those milestones and all the progress they make along the way. Not just focusing on the end goal, but all those small wins too.
I get it. It's like, when someone runs a mile, you wouldn't say, great job, but remember you're aiming for a marathon, right?
Right.
Like that kind of statement, even though you mean well, could make them feel like their effort isn't good enough.
Totally. It diminishes their accomplishment.
So we want to acknowledge and reinforce those smaller achievements too, right? It's all part of the journey.
It is. It's like climbing a mountain.
Ah, I love that analogy.
Reaching that big goal, that's like getting to the top of the mountain.
Right.
But to get there, you got to take all those smaller steps along the way.
And celebrate every single one.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's recap those 7 guidelines just to make sure they're fresh in everyone's mind.
Okay, let's do it.
Number 1, personalize reinforcers. Number 2, reinforce immediately. Number 3, reinforce specific behavior. Number 4, reinforce with sincerity. Number 5, reinforce frequently. Number 6, don't reinforce and punish at the same time. And number 7, don't mix goal setting and reinforcement.
Boom. Nailed it.
Woohoo. We did it. But wait, there's more, right?
Oh, yeah. Mastering the art of reinforcement goes beyond just knowing the guidelines.
Right. Because sometimes even when you know the rules, you can still trip up, you know?
Totally. There are some common pitfalls that even experienced ABA professionals can fall into.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting.
Oh, sure.
What are some of those pitfalls we need to watch out for?
So one common pitfall, and I'm sure we've all been guilty of this at some point, is not using a variety of reinforcers.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like, we all have our favorites, the go-tos that we know usually work.
Exactly. But if we keep using the same ones over and over again, they can kind of lose their effectiveness.
Makes sense. It's like, if you offered pizza for every celebration. At first, everyone's super excited about pizza parties. But if it's the only reward you ever offer, well, eventually it's not so exciting anymore.
Exactly. Variety is key. We want to keep those reinforcers fresh and exciting. Think about doing those preference assessments regularly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Helps you discover new things that might be motivating. Okay, so variety is important. What's another pitfall we should watch out for?
Another one is asking for too much too soon.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's easy to get caught up in that, especially when we're really eager to see progress.
Right, like we want them to succeed, so we might accidentally set the bar too high too quickly.
Exactly. But remember, behavior change takes time and patience. We need to break those bigger goals down into smaller steps.
Bite-sized pieces, right? Make it manageable.
Exactly. And then reinforce each of those milestones along the way.
So it's like teaching someone to ride a bike. You wouldn't expect them to do a wheelie on their first try, right?
No way.
You'd start with the basics like balancing, pedaling, and then gradually work up to those more challenging skills.
That's a great analogy. And that same principle applies to behavior change. Reinforce those baby steps towards the bigger goal.
Okay, I like that. Baby steps.
Yeah.
Now, this next pitfall is something I think a lot of people get confused about, the difference between rewards and reinforcers.
Yeah, it's a subtle difference, but it's an important one to understand.
So break it down for us. What's the key difference?
Rewards are usually given for results, like outcomes, whereas reinforcers are specifically for behaviors.
Okay, so give us an example.
Sure. Let's say someone meets a sales target and gets a bonus. That bonus is a reward for the outcome hitting that target.
Okay, I see.
But you would reinforce the behaviors that led to that outcome, like making sales calls, building those relationships with clients, going the extra mile to provide amazing customer service.
So it's about focusing on the actions that lead to the results, not just the results themselves.
Exactly. It's about recognizing and reinforcing the process.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of things that make sense, or rather don't make sense, let's talk about another common mix-up. Reinforcement versus bribery.
Yes, bribery. That's a tricky one for sure.
Even people who know ABA principles can get tripped up on this one.
Totally. So the biggest difference really comes down to timing.
Okay, timing. I'm listening.
Reinforcement always happens after the behavior. Always.
Got it.
But bribery happens before the behavior. It's like trying to entice the behavior with a reward.
So like if you clean your room, I'll give you candy. That's bribery.
Exactly. You're trying to get them to do something by dangling a reward in front of them.
Whereas reinforcement would be more like, wow, your room looks so clean. I'm really impressed with your effort. You can have some candy.
Exactly. The behavior happens first, and then the reinforcement comes after.
Makes sense. So bribery is basically saying, do this, and then you'll get that. But reinforcement is more like, you did this, and that's awesome.
That's it. And it's an important distinction to make because bribery can actually create a dependence on rewards. It can undermine that intrinsic motivation we're trying to foster.
Right. We want them to feel good about the accomplishment itself, not just be motivated by the reward.
Exactly. We want them to experience that internal satisfaction and pride. Okay, so we've talked about rewards, reinforcers, and bribery. Now, what about manipulation? Sometimes it feels like reinforcement is just a sneaky way to control people.
I can see why some people might feel that way.
Definitely. And those concerns are valid, especially if reinforcement is used in a way that feels dishonest or insincere.
Right, like if someone makes promises they don't intend to keep, or if they're just using reinforcement to get what they want without genuinely caring about the person.
Exactly. Transparency and genuine intentions are crucial. We want to build a culture of positive reinforcement, where everyone feels supported and respected, not manipulated or controlled.
I love that. Support and respect are key.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about another pitfall. This one is about delivering reinforcement non-contingently.
Ah, yes. This is a big one. Non-contingent reinforcement can really undermine our efforts.
So break that down for us. What does non-contingent even mean?
It means giving reinforcement even when the behavior you're trying to encourage hasn't actually happened.
Oh, I see. So it's like giving everyone on a team a trophy, even if they didn't really contribute to the win.
Exactly. It might seem fair on the surface, but it actually sends the wrong message.
Right, because if everyone gets the same reinforcement, regardless of their effort, it kind of loses its meaning.
Exactly. Reinforcement works best when it's directly tied to the behavior. That way, people understand what they did well and are more likely to do it again.
Got it. So contingent reinforcement, good. Non-contingent reinforcement, not so much. Okay, what's next on our list of pitfalls?
Well, this one we touched on earlier, but it's worth repeating. Delivering reinforcement insincerely.
Oh yeah, sincerity is super important.
It really is. Insincere praise is like a counterfeit bill. It might look real at first glance, but it holds no real value.
I love that analogy.
People can usually tell when you're not being genuine.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it just makes everything feel fake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It erodes trust and undermines the whole point of reinforcement.
So how do we make sure our praise is sincere? We talked about this a bit earlier, but any other tips?
It really comes down to being specific and genuine in your delivery. Connect your praise to the behavior you're reinforcing. Let your words reflect your true feelings.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly. Your tone of voice, your facial expressions, your body language, they all play a role in conveying sincerity.
It's all about that authentic connection. Okay, this next pitfall is an interesting one. Delivering tangible reinforcement without social reinforcement. What's that all about?
So this is when we rely solely on tangible rewards, like gift cards, prizes, that kind of stuff, without pairing them with social reinforcement.
So like no verbal praise, no expressions of appreciation, just the gift.
Right. And while those tangible rewards can be motivating, they're even more powerful when they're combined with social reinforcement.
It's like you're saying, hey, I see you, I appreciate your effort, and here's a little something extra to show you how much I value your contribution.
Exactly. It adds that personal touch and makes the reinforcement more meaningful. Okay, ready for our last pitfall?
Hit me with it.
This one's all about reinforcing the behavior of reinforcing.
Wait, what? We have to reinforce reinforcement. That sounds kind of meta.
It might sound a bit strange, but it's crucial for building a strong culture of positive reinforcement.
Okay, so explain what you mean by reinforcing the behavior of reinforcing.
It's about creating an environment where everyone feels comfortable praising each other and acknowledging achievements. And that includes everyone, peers, supervisors, everyone.
I see. So it's like we often have this unspoken rule that praise should only flow downwards, from supervisors to employees, from teachers to students.
Exactly. But what if we could break free from that mindset? What if we could create workplaces where everyone felt empowered to recognize and appreciate each other's contributions, regardless of their position?
I love that idea. It would create such a positive and supportive environment.
Right. And the best part is, it doesn't require any fancy tools or techniques. It's simply about acknowledging and appreciating those who take the time to recognize others.
Like a simple thank you for noticing her hard work, or I appreciate you taking the time to acknowledge his contribution.
Exactly. Those small gestures can go a long way in reinforcing the behavior of reinforcing.
So by reinforcing the act of giving reinforcement, we create this ripple effect of positivity.
Exactly. And that ripple effect can transform workplace cultures, making them more supportive, more encouraging, and ultimately more productive.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've covered so much ground, from those basic principles of reinforcement to all those subtle nuances that can make such a big difference.
It's been a pleasure diving into this topic with you, and I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive with a final thought-provoking question for our listeners.
Ooh, I love a good takeaway question. What do you have in mind? Hit me with that question. What should our listeners be thinking about?
So, As we wrap up this deep dive, all about delivering those reinforcers effectively, I want you to think about this. How can you apply these guidelines, not just with your clients, but also think about within your ABA teams and even in your personal life,
Yeah, that's a good one. That really makes you think about how these principles, they could be used everywhere, not just at work.
Exactly. It's like developing that mindset of positive reinforcement, noticing and acknowledging the good stuff, celebrating those small wins, right? And creating that supportive environment, for yourself and those around you.
So it's not just about knowing the guidelines, it's about actually using them.
Yeah.
In a way that feels real and genuine.
Totally. It's about making reinforcement just a natural part of how you interact with the world.
I love that. Well, I know I learned a ton from this conversation. Hopefully our listeners did too. I'd love to hear what resonated with them.
Yeah, me too.
What challenges have they faced, when it comes to delivering reinforcers effectively?
Yeah, share your thoughts with us.
Let us know. Hit us up on social media.
We're all learning together, right? And even those of us who've been in the field for a while, we can always benefit from going back to the basics.
Right, brushing up on those fundamentals.
Yeah, and refining our approach.
That's the continuous process.
Totally. We can always strive to be more effective with how we deliver reinforcement.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of ABA Chapter Chat.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep those reinforcers flowing.
Yes. And don't forget...
Don't forget what?
Reinforce the behavior of reinforcing.
Love it.
See you next time for another deep dive into the world of ABA.
Bye, everyone.